Well, thank you all, and thank you so much, Chuck and his team at the SARE Foundation, and also some of the scientists here, including one right in front of me this morning who helped my brain literally expand. So I want to say thank you. And today I'm so honored to be sitting next to Murali, who doesn't normally like to be the center of attention. Because his focus typically is on some of the best founders on the planet. As you might know, Murali invested in, and his fund, ICONIQ, invested in Anthropic. So, I'm super honored to be sitting with you today and just to have a chat. Let's just pretend we're at a British pub, okay?
I love it.
None of the serious stuff, please.
I love it. It's great. Well, really excited to be here. Thank you, everybody, for the time. Maybe just a brief introduction on myself. My name is Murali Joshi. I'm one of the general partners at ICONIQ. I've been at the firm for about a decade and very fortunate to lead a lot of our AI infrastructure and cybersecurity investing efforts at the firm. Have been fortunate to see ICONIQ grow. We're today a global investment platform, about 100 billion of AUM publicly, and have been fortunate to be one of the largest shareholders and partners to companies like Anthropic, Datadog, Snowflake, GitLab, Open Evidence, and many, many others over the years. And so we've been very, very privileged to see these companies grow and scale over time, and really excited to share more perspectives and insights about our journey partnering with these companies and what we see in the market.
So I started before we got on stage, I was actually super intrigued to find out that you actually had, a clear question that most people in the room probably have, and anyone tuned in, is how did you find these incredible entrepreneurs? And I specifically asked you about the Anthropic founders, and I was intrigued to know that you've had a relationship for some time with them. So I'd love you to go into that and how you identify them, and where it came from.
Absolutely. We've been really fortunate. First off, in ICONIQ's history, we initially started as a family office. And the reason that's relevant is our DNA of our firm has always been to support generational founders and tech entrepreneurs, dating back to the era of the internet, and really working with some of the most influential technology executives, seeing them scale and navigate their personal lives all the way to their business lives, and kind of marrying the two together has kind of been what we've been our core value system, and recognizing that, hey, as part of that journey, we can really be great partners, not just in terms of their personal journey, but also to their business. And that was kind of the birth of what is ICONIQ Venture and Growth, which actually started 4 or 5 years after ICONIQ was born. And we've been really fortunate, as part of that kind of DNA and those roots, to meet founders very early in their journey. And one thing that I always tell people is it's never too early to meet ICONIQ. We've been really fortunate to lead and incubate companies from like seed, Series A to IPO and beyond. And in some of those journeys, it enabled us to meet amazing founders and entrepreneurs. When we first met Dylan Field at Figma, it was actually an introduction through Reid Hoffman and Jeff Weiner, who are folks that we're really close with from the LinkedIn network. And those are common examples of how we meet some amazing businesses and entrepreneurs through our relationships, our ecosystem, and our network. And that continues to kind of compound on itself over the years. And so when ICONIQ initially started, we were doing these kind of one-off individual kind of introductions and investments. And over the years, we've been able to build our brand and our platform globally, and have been fortunate to work with some amazing founders through that. And specifically in the case of Anthropic and Snowflake and Datadog, the first point in which we meet a founder isn't a point when they're actually actively fundraising. The first point we meet a founder is typically just the start of a very long-term relationship. And oftentimes, we find ourselves in a situation where we're building and cultivating relationships with founders for many years. I was on the board of a company called Statsig that was acquired by OpenAI last year, and I've known Vijay at Statsig for over 4 years before we actually invested a penny into the company. And I flew up to Seattle probably like 12 times to actually understand the entrepreneur, the journey, what they were building, understand the technology behind it before we actually were able to invest. And the same is true with Anthropic, with Datadog, with Snowflake, and a bunch of others, where we've known those founders and operators for many, many years, supported them in their journey, helped become a thought partner to their business, and over time earned that opportunity. And I use that word intentionally to earn the right to be able to partner with them. And we've been really privileged to see them grow and scale. And from an investor perspective too, it helps because we actually are able to understand the business more than just at a snapshot, but actually over a longitudinal period of time. And I always tell founders, like, this is a marriage. And if you really think about the partnership, there are some investors who focus on the immediate journey. I think for us, we focus more on this multi-decade long relationship, and some of those roots really come down to the DNA of ICONIQ and our family office roots.
That, going specifically to the example you gave earlier to me is with Anthropic. You said the founders, you kept hearing that customers were using Claude. So many customers had switched over and or were using it. And that's when you realized there is something here. And so for the founders out there, is that really adding value? How do you, is that your key message? Add value to your customers, the problem you're solving?
Yeah, I think the biggest focus is through the founder journey. Oftentimes, you're walking through a path and walking through a forest and really understanding that everyone takes different paths, but to really recognize that you're going towards the top of the mountain or the end of the path and the top of the peak, I think sometimes feels like it's really tough to figure out if you're actually in the thick of it, where you're headed and if you're going the right direction. The thing that we always encourage the founders that we work with are ones that really have that kind of bold vision, that unbridled optimism to a degree, or and desire and confidence to really build and take big bets in terms of their business. And the biggest thing that we're kind of encouraged to see is iteration speed. And one thing that we kind of encourage this group to think about too is a lot of the founders that we work with aren't just seeking ground truth. They're trying to seek that speed and iteration to be able to identify what's the best thing for their customer and their voice of their customer, which for us, we're super excited to kind of see. And it ultimately changes over time. And so with some of the most impressive technologies, research labs, and businesses that we partnered with, at the early onset of investing in these companies or partnering with these companies, the business model looked very different for how it evolved over time. And actually understanding and tracking that journey from its early innings and inflections to then understanding and seeing how the business unfolded is something that we really care about. Some of the common themes that we've really seen successful or be successful have been listening to the voice of the customer, driving that high iteration speed, and then of course bringing the talent density kind of associated with that. And oftentimes when I speak with a lot of these founders, they'll always share with me, Murali, I'm just so floored at the quality of the talent that I'm able to convince join my startup at such a stage. And that's usually a great signal and indication that you're finding these missionaries to join the company and help you build, which has been really, really encouraging for us when we think about what founders do at the onset.
So I, of course, used Claude to find out a little bit about you. And, you were someone who first in your family to go to an amazing university. You always knocked on doors to make sure, cold called. And, that sort of relentlessness is incredible. And so how do you, when you're sitting in front of someone, how can you see that same hunger in their belly, that they're going to absolutely do it, whatever the winds?
It's a great question. One of the principles that we kind of aspire to at ICONIQ, and I've been really fortunate to really think about, is really identifying founders who we call as customer zero. We actually wrote a piece on this where we really believe that many of you have probably likely heard the adage that we want to invest in founders that are missionaries, not mercenaries. And to a similar degree, in effect, we think about operating and working with founders who really have lived through the pain point of whatever problem they're trying to solve firsthand. And so identifying and looking for operators who really understand the domain expertise, live through it vicariously, have either tried to build this product before in a company or have lived through it firsthand, and have recognized that the only way to actually solve this problem set is through building and being an entrepreneur themselves. And that is probably one of the most impressive, passionate, and visceral experiences that you can see as both the founder and operator. And then also when you think about hiring individuals as an investor, that becomes really palpable. And so one of the questions that I always ask our team and my team whenever we meet incredible founders and operators is, hey, would you quit your job and go work for this person? And that question, that simple question, is actually one of the greatest kind of questions that we use as a clarity of thought to identify, hey, do we really believe in the values, the mission, and what is being held here? And so as founders, if you think about living within the problem as customer zero, that oftentimes just gives that unbridled level of optimism combined with speed and iteration that enables you to really build something really special.
That is, yeah, I see that image in the people you've invested in. It's incredible. And I'm sure someone sitting in this room. So speaking of people sitting in this room, they're incredible scientists and they're incredible researchers. And what is your thinking about this, the science space and what AI is doing to it? And what are you seeing at the moment as a fund?
Yeah. One thing that's been amazing is the world of AI has really changed what talent has looked like. I think talent more than ever has been very research-centric, science first, which has really put individuals in this room at the spotlight, which has been really exciting and really encouraging. Now, I think one of the things, I'm really fortunate growing up here in the Bay Area where a lot of my friends, I'm the black sheep, I'm an investor. Most of them are software engineers, researchers, PhDs, and I look up to them in many different ways. And a lot of my close friends and peers, the one big point that I always tell them is they're always seeking for the ground truth as a scientist, as a researcher, testing hypotheses for many, many months, sometimes years. And as a founder, as an operator, you're almost doing quite literally the opposite, where you're testing hypotheses at maybe like 85% accuracy or something even less than that, not always getting to the ground truth, but focusing on iteration and speed to actually identify if you're able to rapidly scale, which is one important nuance that we've been able to see and recognize, and I think that's something that's really important. And that's really changing, especially in the world of AI, which is you now have the tools and the technology to enable all of us to be more productive. The second piece is actually identifying how you scale a business and think about moat. And oftentimes, people think of data as a moat, especially when you look at how businesses are evolving so rapidly. We've been able to recognize that if your data source is public and it's pretty much available, that's not really a moat. What is a moat, though, is deriving a closed-loop system, being able to actually iterate more swiftly, be able to train the information much more effectively, and that has enabled companies and businesses to build more of a moat. And the last piece is talent density. And one thing that we haven't talked about enough is driving a culture. We're able to attract the best kind of talent for your business. And if you're able to do that, it has compounding effects to it.
That's super interesting. What I see in the cyber sector and security sector, AI security sectors, all the people in AI security are suddenly, really the champions of the world in the post-Mythos world. Are you seeing that as well? And where are these incredible talents? Can we train more talent? Are they going to come from universities, or should we take them from existing large companies? How would you, as a founder, think about this?
Yeah, I think security, I'm very biased, but I think security has always been prevalent and relevant across many different generations of technology. It's only heightened in the world of like Mythos and some of these large language models that have provided capabilities that have accelerated the rate of coding adoption, but have also accelerated our ability to identify those vulnerabilities in really effective ways. I'm sure many folks in the room have read the research and the analysis on what limited previews of Mythos and others have identified, which has been really exciting and compelling. Now, from a talent perspective, it's also allowed companies to do a lot more with less, which I think is something that's been really encouraging for us that we look at when we think about why we're really excited about cybersecurity generally and the durability of it. We also think AI, while many people are utilizing AI more and more, we're hearing all of our companies driving that. The core premise of core cybersecurity businesses that are doing endpoint detection, that are doing firewalls, are still there and very defensible and driving real advantages by deploying the other kinds of agents at the end point, which has been really encouraging for us to see.
Well, before, I'm super interested in understanding what are you super excited about? The pace of change is incredible. You're the forefront of it. And what are you excited about? What do you think is going to come in the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm really excited about the advancements across science, robotics, hardware specifically. When I look at a lot of investors, including folks like myself, candidly, I spend a lot of my time in the cloud and software era and the internet era recognizing asset-light technologies, asset-light businesses. This is the moment that we're seeing in the cycle for research, science, and hardware. And it's really, as I kind of alluded to, having its moment. And we're really, really excited about it. We're seeing it really evolve where businesses are no longer just talking about using AI for drug discovery or R&D development and lifecycle acceleration through just theoretical discussions. They're actually doing it more in practical applications. And we're really excited about that. As we start seeing this unfold, we're increasingly having more conversations where we're seeing buyers at large pharma companies, large biotech firms that historically were very slow to adopt the cloud era, now accelerate their usage of AI unlike we've ever seen before in an order of magnitude. And that rate of growth and that rate of acceleration for us is really encouraging because it only signals and indicates that what we're about to see at the inflection point of life sciences is just at the cusp, and we're really excited about that.
One final question from the industry is that, capacity. There's so much use of AI that how do you have capacity? How do you solve for that?
There are some amazingly smart people that are in this room and not in this room, that some of that might be in China too, right now, that are solving these problems, which is amazing to think about. And we've been really privileged to be early investors in data centers actually before that became a very relevant thing. And one thing that we've been studying increasingly are the energy and compute and power kind of supply chain. And one thing that's been really encouraging is seeing just the diversity of where compute is coming from. And increasingly, we're seeing businesses like Anthropic and others take those strategies towards diversifying compute, diversifying these sources of where they're getting capacity from, and we've been really encouraged about it. So I'm really excited about where that's headed.
Well, we hear it's a big problem, so...
Long way to go.
Well, Murali, thank you so much.